It began on a warm spring afternoon, the kind that wrapped the city in soft gold and distant hums of traffic. Lily Carson sat by the window of her small apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching the sunlight pour through the blinds and trace patterns on the hardwood floor. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched for over an hour, as she reread the same line in an old letter that had arrived that morning, a letter that would quietly undo everything she thought she knew about her life. The envelope was unmarked except for her name, written in elegant cursive. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper that carried no return address, only a simple message: Lily, the truth about your father isn't what you believe. Ask your mother about 1989. The signature at the bottom was smudged, unreadable. For a long time, she just stared at it, the words sinking slowly into her consciousness like stones falling through deep water. Her father, Daniel Carson, had died when she was 16, a car accident on a rainy night, or at least that's what she'd always been told. He was the kind of man everyone seemed to love. Gentle, steady, always fixing things around the house, humming Sinatra while he cooked. Her childhood memories were threaded with moments of laughter and the faint smell of his aftershave. He wasn't just her father, he was her anchor. And now, suddenly, someone was telling her that anchor wasn't real. Lily's mother, Evelyn, lived just outside town, in the same house Lily grew up in. The next day, she drove there without calling first. The drive felt longer than usual, the rain tapping against the windshield in rhythmic pulses. The house looked smaller now, like childhood memories had stretched it larger than it really was. Evelyn was in the garden when Lily arrived, wearing her old straw hat, pruning the rose bushes like always. When Lily showed her the letter, Evelyn's hands froze midair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled the trees, and somewhere a crow cawed in the distance. Evelyn set the shears down and wiped her hands on her apron, but her eyes refused to meet Lily's. "Who sent this?" she whispered. "I don't know. That's why I'm here." Evelyn sighed, the kind of sigh that carried years of weight. "There are things you don't need to know, sweetheart." But Lily wasn't 16 anymore, and she wasn't ready to be treated like a child. "Mom, please. I've gone 30 years thinking I knew who I was. I think I deserve the truth." Evelyn closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet. "Your father loved you, Lily. That's all that matters. So you're saying it's true?" Her mother didn't answer, and that silence said everything. That night, Lily barely slept. The world she'd known had tilted, and the more she tried to straighten it, the more crooked it seemed. Who was she really? Who was the man who had raised her, and who wasn't he? By morning, she made a decision. If her mother wouldn't tell her, she'd find out herself. She began with the year mentioned in the letter, 1989. That was the year before she was born. Her parents had lived in Seattle then, according to old family albums. She started searching through online archives, old local newspapers, anything she could find about her parents from that time. Days turned into nights filled with scrolling, coffee, and growing unease. Then she found something, a photo from a charity gala in 1989, in a Seattle paper's online archive. Her mother was there, smiling beside a tall man who wasn't Daniel Carson. The caption read, "Evelyn Brooks and Dr. Michael Reynolds at the Children's Hospital Benefit." Lily zoomed in. The man had the same blue-gray eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. The same sharp jawline. The resemblance was undeniable. Her pulse quickened, her chest tightening as the truth unfurled inside her like a dark bloom. She found out that Dr. Reynolds had been a pediatrician in Seattle, respected and beloved. He'd moved to Maine in the early 90s, the same time Evelyn and Daniel had relocated to Oregon. It wasn't a coincidence, it couldn't be. Lily took a week off work and booked a flight to Maine. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell anyone. The plane ride was a blur of clouds and racing thoughts. By the time she arrived in Bar Harbor, she felt like she was moving through a dream she couldn't wake from. The address she found for Dr. Reynolds was a quaint cottage overlooking the sea. She hesitated on the doorstep, her hand trembling as she knocked. A moment later, the door opened. He was older now, silver hair, kind eyes, and a familiar tilt to his smile. When he saw her, he blinked, not with confusion, but with recognition. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. Lily's breath caught. "So it's true." He nodded slowly, sadness filling his gaze. "Evelyn and I, we were young, foolish. We thought we could rewrite the rules of love. When she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified. Daniel wanted children. She didn't know how to tell him the truth. I thought I could let her go, but not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You knew about me all this time?" "I did," he said. "But I promised your mother I'd stay away. She wanted to protect you from the scandal, from the pain." The words settled between them like a fog, heavy but strangely peaceful. For the first time in weeks, Lily felt her anger begin to dissolve, replaced by something gentler, understanding. They talked for hours. He showed her photographs, told her stories about the past, about the life her mother once had, the dreams she gave up. Lily began to see not betrayal, but sacrifice. Her mother had made choices born of fear, yes, but also love, the kind of love that tries to protect even when it hurts. When Lily finally returned to Oregon, the air felt different. Softer, lighter. She found her mother sitting on the porch, waiting. Evelyn's eyes were tired, but when she saw Lily, relief flickered across her face. "I met him," Lily said simply. Evelyn's lips trembled, and she nodded. "I figured you would." Lily sat beside her. "You should have told me." "I know," Evelyn whispered. "I was afraid you'd hate me." "I don't," Lily said. "I just wish I'd known sooner." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. Eventually, Evelyn reached over and took Lily's hand, and for the first time in years, it felt like nothing was broken between them. That night, as rain began to fall softly against the roof, Lily stood by her window and watched the drops race down the glass. The city glowed faintly beyond the mist, and she thought of the man by the sea, of her mother in the garden, of the tangled lines of love and truth that had shaped her life. She finally understood that identity wasn't defined by blood alone, or even by secrets. It was made from the people who loved you, the ones who stayed, and the ones who let you go. And as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, Lily smiled to herself. The storm that had once shattered her world had somehow rebuilt it too, piece by honest piece, until all that was left was peace. The rain had eased by morning, leaving a pale shimmer across the city. The streets were slick, the air smelled faintly of wet earth and magnolias, and the world felt like it had been rinsed clean. Lily stood by her kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching the soft mist curl through the alley behind her building. She hadn't slept much, but for the first time in days, the quiet didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a companion. She couldn't stop replaying the night before, her mother's trembling voice, the gentleness in her eyes, the weight of decades lifting quietly between them. Forgiveness didn't arrive in a single moment, she realized. It came in waves, slow and steady, washing over the sharp edges until they softened into something almost tender. Over the following weeks, Lily found herself piecing together the fragments of her past like a puzzle she hadn't realized was missing pieces. She drove to her mother's house more often. They'd spend long afternoons together, drinking tea on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in the kind of silence that no longer hurt. Evelyn started opening up more, telling stories from before Lily was born about Seattle, about the music she loved, the job she left when she married Daniel. It was in those quiet conversations that Lily began to see her mother not just as mom, but as a woman, complicated, fallible, brave in her own quiet ways. There had been love, heartbreak, guilt, and choices no one should have had to make alone. And through it all, there had been a fierce desire to protect the life that came out of it, Lily herself. Still, something inside Lily couldn't rest completely. Knowing the truth was one thing, understanding it was another. So, one afternoon, she wrote to Dr. Reynolds. She thanked him for meeting her, for his honesty, for not running from the truth even when it had been easier to stay hidden. He replied within a few days, his handwriting neat, the words simple yet full of warmth. "I spent a lifetime standing in the shadows," he wrote. "But seeing you, Knowing that you grew up strong and kind, it made the years of silence feel worth it. I don't ask for anything, only that you know you were loved from the very beginning. That letter stayed on her nightstand for weeks. Sometimes, when she couldn't sleep, she'd read it under the soft glow of her bedside lamp, the words soothing her like a lullaby. Life began to feel lighter. Work no longer felt like a fog she moved through on autopilot. She laughed more with friends, took walks by the river after work, started baking again, something she used to love as a child. The smell of cinnamon and sugar would fill her small kitchen, wrapping around her like comfort. But sometimes, late at night, she'd feel the pull of questions that still lingered, not angry ones anymore, just curious. What would life have been like if she'd known from the start? Would she have felt different about herself? Or maybe the truth had always been waiting for her at the exact moment she was ready to face it. One rainy weekend, she decided to visit Daniel's grave. She hadn't been there in years, not since college. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill overlooking the outskirts of town, surrounded by oaks that whispered when the wind passed through. She brought a small bouquet of lilies, his favorite flower. Kneeling by the headstone, she brushed away a few fallen leaves. The granite was cool beneath her fingertips, the engraved words slightly faded. "Hey, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. "I found out the truth." The air was still for a moment, as if even the world held its breath. "I know you weren't my biological father," she continued softly, "but that doesn't change what you were to me. You taught me how to ride a bike, how to stand up for myself, how to laugh when everything felt heavy. You were my father in every way that mattered." The wind rustled gently through the trees, and she closed her eyes, imagining his voice, deep, calm, steady, telling her that everything was okay. That love wasn't about blood, but about choice. And he had chosen her. As she left the cemetery, the clouds parted for just a moment, and sunlight spilled through, bright and golden, touching the grass with warmth. It felt like a small sign, quiet, but enough. When Lily returned home that evening, she found a voicemail on her phone. It was from Dr. Reynolds. His voice was gentle, a little hesitant, like someone who had rehearsed what to say but still wasn't sure if it was the right thing. "I was thinking," he said, "if you ever want to visit again, not to talk about the past, but just to meet, maybe by the ocean, I'd like that." She didn't hesitate this time. She booked another flight a week later. Maine was colder this time of year, the sea gray and restless. When she arrived at the little seaside cafe they'd agreed on, he was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw her, smiling the same quiet smile she'd seen in the mirror so many times without realizing it. They talked for hours again, but this time the conversation wasn't heavy. They spoke about books, about the sea, about her job, and the small joys of everyday life. There was no guilt, no need for apologies anymore, just a strange, fragile kind of peace that comes when people finally stop running from the truth. Before she left, he handed her a small box. "Something I kept all these years," he said. Inside was a photograph, Evelyn, young and radiant, holding baby Lily in her arms. Standing beside them was Dr. Reynolds, smiling softly. He looked both proud and heartbroken. "I took it before I left Seattle," he said. "Your mother didn't know I kept a copy." Lily traced the edges of the photo, her eyes stinging. "Thank you," she whispered. When she flew home, she framed the picture and placed it on her bookshelf beside one of Daniel, her 3 parents, in a way, each of them shaping her life in their own imperfect, human way. As months passed, the heaviness of the secret faded into something else, a story she carried not with pain, but with understanding. She began volunteering at a youth center on weekends, mentoring girls who struggled with family issues, abandonment, and identity. She never told them her own story, but she listened, really listened, and sometimes that was enough. Every now and then, she'd receive a letter from Dr. Reynolds, handwritten, always ending with the same line, "Take care of your heart, Lily. It's the best part of both of us." Her mother, too, changed. There was more laughter in her home now, more ease in her eyes. They cooked together, went on long drives, and even visited Maine once, Evelyn and Dr. Reynolds meeting again after 3 decades. It was quiet, awkward at first, but when Evelyn looked at him and said softly, "You were right, she turned out perfect," the years seemed to melt away. The past didn't vanish, but it became part of the landscape of their lives, something they could look at without flinching. On a cool evening nearly a year later, Lily sat by her window again, a candle flickering beside her, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. The rain had returned, gentle and rhythmic, tapping against the glass. She closed her eyes and listened. To the rain, to her heartbeat, to the silence that now felt full instead of empty. The truth had once threatened to shatter her. But in the end, it had rebuilt her not into who she was before, but into someone stronger, more whole, more awake. And as the rain fell, she whispered to no one in particular, maybe to Daniel, maybe to the universe, "I'm okay now." The rain outside her apartment grew steadier as the days turned into weeks. It became a part of her evenings, a rhythm that reminded her to breathe slower, to be still, to let time soften the things that couldn't be rushed. Lily had never noticed how quiet her neighborhood was at night, how the streetlights painted golden halos on the wet pavement, how distant car tires made a low whisper like waves against sand. The city, which once felt so heavy and crowded, had begun to feel like it was humming gently around her, keeping her safe in its quiet hum. Her mother visited often now. Sometimes they cooked dinner together, sometimes they just sat with mugs of tea and said nothing. But silence had changed. It wasn't the uneasy kind that waited for someone to speak first. It was the gentle kind that allowed space for warmth. Evelyn often brought old photos, boxes of them, yellowed edges and curling corners. Together, they would sort through them, laughing softly at the outdated hairstyles, the half-blurred smiles, the way time had left its fingerprints across everything. One evening, as they went through another box, Evelyn found an old birthday card Lily had made when she was 8. It was drawn with bright markers, the handwriting crooked but full of love. "To the best dad in the world, I love you more than pancakes." Evelyn's hand trembled a little when she read it, but instead of tears, she smiled. "He was a good man," Evelyn said quietly. "Daniel loved you so much. You know that, right?" Lily nodded. "I do." It wasn't just a statement anymore. It was a truth that lived inside her. For years, she had felt like the ground beneath her had been built on lies, but now she saw it differently. It wasn't lies, it was protection. A story written to keep her safe until she was ready to read the real one. That night, after her mother left, Lily lit a candle and sat by the window again. The photograph Dr. Reynolds had given her rested on the table beside her. 3 faces, her mother, herself as a baby, and the man whose eyes mirrored her own. She studied it the way one studies constellations, searching for patterns, connections, meaning. The picture didn't make her sad anymore. It made her grateful, grateful that love had existed even in silence. Grateful that she had been loved by more than one kind of father. Weeks later, she took a short trip back to Maine. It wasn't planned. She woke up one morning with the urge to see the ocean, the same ocean her biological father had lived near all his life. When she arrived, the sky was gray, and the air smelled of salt and pine. She drove along the coastline until she reached a narrow path that led down to the shore. She walked barefoot across the damp sand, her hair pulled back, her coat buttoned to her chin. The sea stretched endlessly before her, a muted blue, restless and alive. She thought about Dr. Reynolds, how strange it was to have known him for such a short time, and yet to feel his presence so strongly in her life now. She found a smooth stone, small enough to fit in her palm, and held it tightly. "For you," she whispered into the wind, and tossed it into the waves. The stone disappeared without a sound, swallowed by the sea. For a moment, she stood there with her eyes closed, the ocean wind against her face, her heartbeat slow and even. The world didn't feel broken anymore. It felt wide and forgiving. When she got back to her car, she saw that she had a new message from Dr. Reynolds. It was short, only a few words, but it made her chest ache in a good way. "The tide is calm today. Maybe we're both standing by the same water." It was strange, she thought, how small the world could feel once forgiveness entered it. Months passed again. Seasons shifted. The leaves in the city turned golden, then fell, then bloomed again in spring. Life carried on in soft, ordinary ways. She found new friends, started painting again, took up journaling. She wasn't searching for who she was anymore, she was learning to be who she was. Sometimes, she still missed Daniel terribly. She would catch herself reaching for her phone to call him about a flat tire or a new recipe or something funny she saw online. And when she remembered he wasn't there, she would close her eyes, take a deep breath, and whisper, "Thank you," because his love still lived in every piece of her strength. She started visiting his grave regularly. Sometimes she'd talk aloud, other times she'd just sit. She'd bring fresh flowers, lilies in spring, daisies in summer, chrysanthemums in fall. Once, she brought one of Dr. Reynolds' letters and read it quietly under her breath. The words felt heavier, fuller, when spoken aloud, carried into the air for anyone, or maybe everyone, to hear. Her mother joined her once. They stood together, the wind cool against their faces. Evelyn placed her hand on the headstone, her eyes distant but soft. "He'd be proud of you," she said. "I hope so," Lily murmured. "He would be," Evelyn said firmly. "You've become everything he hoped you'd be and everything I dreamed of." That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She sat by the open window, listening to the quiet hum of the city, the way cars passed like waves in the distance. The candle she had lit burned low, its flame trembling in the draft. She realized something then, that love didn't end when people did. It changed shape. It became memories, lessons, feelings that found new ways to exist inside you. And family wasn't about bloodlines or secrets or names written on paper. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who kept loving you even when the world turned upside down. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of the ocean. In the dream, she was walking along the shore again, but this time she wasn't alone. Daniel walked on one side of her, Dr. Reynolds on the other. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. The waves lapped at their feet, cool and steady, and somewhere far off, the sun was rising. When she woke the next morning, the world felt new again. The city awoke slowly that morning, the streets glistening under a veil of early mist. Sunlight broke gently through the clouds, painting pale streaks of gold across the rooftops. From her apartment window, Lily watched the light settle on the world below, the familiar shapes of her neighborhood becoming clearer with every passing minute. The old coffee shop on the corner was just opening its doors. A man walked his dog, steam rose from sewer grates, and somewhere a distant church bell marked the hour. Lily took a slow sip of her tea. The warmth of it spread through her hands, grounding her in the moment. For the first time in a long while, she felt no urgency, no rush to fill the day with tasks or movement. There was something beautiful about stillness, something she had once avoided because it left too much space for thought. But now, stillness felt like home. Her apartment, small and softly lit, had become her sanctuary. Books lined the shelves, candles flickered on the mantel, and the faint scent of lavender hung in the air. It was a space that reflected the quiet peace she had worked hard to rebuild. There were reminders of her past everywhere, a framed photo of Daniel on the dresser, her mother's old scarf draped over a chair, a postcard from Maine tucked between pages of a novel. But they didn't hurt anymore. They simply existed, part of the fabric of her life. She spent her morning in gentle motion, watering her plants, folding laundry, humming under her breath. Each small act felt intentional, like a quiet conversation with herself. Later, she sat down to write in her journal, something she had started doing every day. The words flowed easily now, not confessions, not regrets, but reflections. Notes about the rain, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the way light shifted across her walls. In the afternoons, she often walked by the river. It was her favorite place, a wide stretch of calm water bordered by trees whose leaves shimmered in the sun. Sometimes, she'd bring a book and read until dusk, the sound of the current mingling with birdsong and the soft chatter of distant pedestrians. She had grown to love the rhythm of the river, always moving, yet always the same. One evening, as she sat on a bench watching the water, she noticed a man sketching at the far end of the path. He was older, his hair silver at the temples, a gentle concentration on his face. There was something familiar about the way he sat, calm, still, focused. After a moment, he looked up and caught her gaze. They exchanged a polite smile. Over the next few weeks, she saw him there often, always in the same spot, always with his sketchbook. Eventually, conversation came naturally. His name was Thomas, a retired architect who had taken up drawing landscapes after his wife passed away. They spoke about art, about music, about the way cities held their own kind of rhythm. There was an ease in their connection, something unhurried and genuine. Lily didn't realize it then, but those quiet meetings became part of her healing too. Life, she understood now, was not meant to be rebuilt in haste. It was meant to be rediscovered, moment by moment, through people and places that reminded her that gentleness still existed. As spring deepened into summer, she began to paint again. The first canvas she touched in years was clumsy, uncertain, but it made her smile. The second came easier. By the third, her strokes had become confident, her colors soft but alive. Her mother visited one afternoon and gasped when she saw them lined against the wall. "Lily," she whispered, touching the edge of one painting, "these are beautiful." Lily laughed softly. "It feels good to make something again." Her mother stayed for dinner that night. They cooked together, pasta and fresh bread, the smell of garlic filling the room. Music played quietly in the background, something old and slow. At one point, Evelyn reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. "You know," she said, "there were so many years when I worried I'd never be able to make things right. But seeing you now, I think we did." Lily squeezed her hand gently. "We did." After her mother left, Lily stood on her balcony, the night air cool against her skin. The city stretched out before her, lights twinkling like scattered stars. Somewhere below, a taxi honked faintly, a window slammed shut, a couple laughed as they walked by. Life, imperfect, ordinary, and beautiful, continued. Later that week, she received another letter from Dr. Reynolds. His handwriting had become shakier with age, but his words carried the same warmth. He told her about the garden he had started by the ocean, how wildflowers had begun to bloom in unexpected places. He wrote that he thought of her often, especially when the morning light touched the waves just right. Lily smiled as she read it. She could almost picture him there, sitting by the window with his coffee, watching the sea breathe in and out like a living thing. She picked up her pen and wrote back. "I've started painting again," she wrote. "I think you'd like them. They all have a bit of the sea in them." In the months that followed, their correspondence became a quiet rhythm, letters filled with ordinary stories, shared silences, and the unspoken comfort of two people connected by something larger than time. By autumn, Lily had organized her first small art exhibit at a local cafe. The walls were lined with her work, soft landscapes, dreamlike seascapes, lights spilling through rain clouds. She invited her mother, her friends, and even Thomas from the riverbank. They all came, filling the room with laughter and warmth. As she stood there, surrounded by people who had become her family in one way or another, she realized something profound. The pain she had carried wasn't gone, it had simply transformed. It had turned into compassion, into gratitude, into a deeper understanding of what it meant to love and to be loved. When the evening ended and the cafe lights dimmed, she stepped outside. The air was cool, the streets quiet except for the whisper of the wind. She looked up at the stars and closed her eyes. For so long, she had lived with questions, with longing, with the ache of things she couldn't change. But now she felt only peace, the kind that doesn't ask for explanations, only acceptance. In that quiet moment, Lily knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The night unfolded like silk, soft and endless, wrapping around the city in its gentle hum. Lily lingered beneath the canopy of stars, her eyes tracing constellations she barely remembered the names of. There was Orion somewhere above the skyline, and Cassiopeia lounging in her eternal curve. The cool wind lifted a strand of Lily's hair and brushed it across her cheek, a small, tender gesture that felt almost like the world itself whispering, "You made it." She walked home slowly, Not because she was tired, but because she wanted to hold on to that moment, the sound of the city breathing, the glow of distant windows, the faint laughter spilling out of a nearby bar. Every flicker of life reminded her that healing wasn't a destination, it was a rhythm she had finally learned to dance to. When she reached her apartment, she left the door open for a while, letting the night air spill inside. The faint scent of autumn, dry leaves, rain on pavement, a trace of wood smoke, lingered in the breeze. She put on a record, an old vinyl that crackled faintly before music filled the room. It was a song her mother used to play when Lily was little, one that made her feel safe, wrapped in the soft hum of home. As she moved around the apartment, she caught sight of her paintings again, the rivers, the skies, the light that always seemed to rise from the horizon. She realized something about them she hadn't before. Every single one captured dawn in some form. Maybe it had been subconscious. Maybe every brushstroke was her way of chasing light, of promising herself that morning always followed the dark. She smiled at the thought and turned down the lights. The city outside pulsed with life, but her apartment remained serene, a quiet world of its own. She sat by the window again, watching the moon hang over the rooftops. Below, the bakery across the street, the one that had inspired her story so long ago, still glowed faintly. The baker, an older man with a kind face, was preparing for the morning rush. His light had always been the first to appear and the last to go out, a steady beacon through the years. She remembered nights when she'd stayed awake watching that small window flicker, nights filled with pain, confusion, anger. Back then, she'd wondered how people kept going, how they found purpose when life tore the ground out from beneath them. But now she understood. The baker wasn't staying awake for the world, he was staying awake for the promise of morning. For the belief that light always returns, even when you can't see it yet. Lily leaned her forehead against the cool glass and whispered softly, "I get it now." The next morning came softly, gold seeping through the blinds, the sound of birdsong threading through the air. She woke slowly, stretching beneath her blanket, and for the first time in years, she didn't dread the day. The world felt new, not because it had changed, but because she had. After breakfast, she decided to stop by the bakery. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and the scent of warm bread enveloped her. The baker looked up and smiled. "Good morning," he greeted warmly. "The usual?" She laughed. "I think I'll try something new today." He handed her a croissant, golden, flaky, filled with almond cream. As she bit into it, the sweetness melted on her tongue. "You're early today," he said, leaning on the counter. "Out for a walk?" "Something like that," she said. "I just wanted to say, thank you for always keeping that light on." He looked surprised for a moment, then smiled gently. "It's funny," he said. "People always notice the bread, never the light. But that's what it's for, to remind us that the dark never wins." Lily nodded, her throat tightening. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly that." She left the bakery with the croissant in one hand and sunlight spilling over her shoulders. The world shimmered with color, the pale blue of the morning sky, the amber of leaves curling on the sidewalk, the reflections dancing across windows. Everything looked alive, awake, as if the universe itself had exhaled after a long silence. She walked toward the river again, her steps light and unhurried. Thomas was there, sketching as usual. When he saw her, he lifted a hand in greeting. "You look different today," he said as she sat beside him. "Do I?" He nodded. "You look lighter." She smiled. "I think I finally put something down." They sat in companionable silence, watching the water. A leaf floated past, spinning slowly before vanishing downstream. Thomas flipped to a new page and began sketching again. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Dawn," he said simply. "It's my favorite time of day. Everything starts over." Lily laughed softly. "Mine too." As they watched the sun climb higher, she realized she no longer felt the heaviness that used to sit behind every sunrise. For years, morning had been a reminder of loss, of everything broken. Now it was a reminder of resilience, that no matter how dark things had been, she had made it to this light. She reached for her phone and opened the draft of a story she had started months ago but never finished, The Bakery That Dreams of Dawn. It had begun as a metaphor, but now it felt real. It was her story, her healing, her truth. And so she began to write again, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Words poured out, rich and alive, not from pain anymore, but from peace. She wrote about the baker who never stopped believing in the morning, the woman who found herself through art, and the river that carried the past away. Hours passed unnoticed. When she finally looked up, the sun had dipped toward the horizon, turning the sky into a watercolor of gold and rose. Thomas had packed up his things and was waving goodbye. "See you tomorrow," he called. "Tomorrow," she said, smiling. As she walked home, the city lights began to glow one by one, mirroring the stars above. She passed the bakery again, its windows fogged with warmth, its light steady as ever. For a moment, she paused and looked through the glass. Inside, the baker was cleaning his counters, humming softly to himself. Beyond him, she saw a small handwritten sign hanging above the register. "Every day begins again." Lily pressed a hand to her heart and whispered, "Yes, it does." And in that instant, she understood the quiet miracle of it all, that even the most shattered hearts could find their rhythm again, that every ending carried within it the seed of something new. When she returned home, she opened her window wide, letting the cool air flow in. The city below shimmered with life, laughter, footsteps, the rustle of wind through the trees. She turned off the lights and stood in the glow of the moon, feeling its gentle pull. The past no longer haunted her. It lived within her, yes, but not as a wound, as a story, one that had shaped her into who she was now. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Somewhere, a bell chimed midnight. Tomorrow would come. Dawn would rise. And she would be ready. The night whispered around the edges of the city as Lily sat beside her window, lost in the kind of silence that hums with unspoken stories. The lights beyond her glass flickered faintly, tiny stars scattered across the streets below, the kind that made her feel small and infinite at once. Her cup of tea had gone cold hours ago, yet she couldn't bring herself to move. There was something about this stillness that felt sacred, as if the universe itself was pausing to listen. She glanced at the stack of unopened envelopes on her desk. They had arrived weeks ago, most from lawyers and estate offices. But at the bottom of the pile lay a smaller one, yellowed slightly, sealed in a way that felt personal, almost intimate. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her mother's. Her chest tightened as she reached for it. The paper was soft at the corners, the ink faded but still clear. Her name was written in a slow, careful hand, Lily N. She hesitated for a long time, fingertips brushing the seal, heart thrumming in her throat. She hadn't seen that handwriting in over a decade. It carried a weight, a warmth, and a ghost. When she finally opened it, the faint scent of lavender drifted out, her mother's perfume, the same one she used to wear while reading bedtime stories. Tears pricked the corners of Lily's eyes as she unfolded the letter. "My dearest Lily, if you are reading this, it means time has carried us to a place where I am no longer by your side. But know that I am never far. I live in the quiet spaces between your thoughts, in the art you create, in the morning light that spills across your window. I know there are truths in our family that may hurt you when you learn them. There are choices I made to protect you, choices your father made out of fear, not cruelty. Life isn't always fair, my love, but it is always teaching. And you, my Lily, were born to rise beyond it all. You were born to bring beauty into this world, to turn sorrow into something worth remembering. Promise me this, never let pain turn you bitter. Let it water your soul instead. And when the rain falls, as it always will, don't hide from it. Listen. The rain has stories, and if you listen closely, it will tell you everything you need to know about healing. All my love, always." Mom, the words blurred as Lily's tears fell onto the page. She pressed the letter against her heart and breathed deeply, feeling the ache shift, not disappear, but soften. For so long, she had carried resentment, confusion, and grief like stones in her chest. Now, with her mother's words resting against her pulse, those stones began to dissolve into something gentler. She didn't notice how long she sat there, but eventually dawn crept over the horizon. The sky bled from deep indigo into soft gold, and the world outside slowly came alive. A distant gull cried. The hum of early traffic stirred. Somewhere, the baker's window light flickered on again, the first spark of morning. Lily folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her journal. Then she stood and walked toward her easel. A blank canvas waited untouched for weeks. She dipped her brush into the faintest blue and drew the first stroke. It wasn't sadness that guided her hand now, but something new, the quiet ache of remembrance, the beauty of release. Hours passed unnoticed. By the time she stepped back, the painting had taken shape. A small cottage by the sea, lanterns glowing through the mist, the faint shimmer of rain against the window. Inside, a woman sat with her hands around a cup of tea, her eyes lifted toward the dawn. The light fell just so warm, forgiving, endless. When she finished, Lily placed her brush down and whispered softly to the painting, "Thank you." It wasn't clear who she was thanking, her mother, herself, or the world that had broken her and rebuilt her again, but the air seemed to hum in response. Later that afternoon, she took the painting to a small gallery she'd once dreamed of showing in. The curator, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, took one long look at it and said, "It feels alive." Lily smiled. "It is." Within weeks, the painting became the centerpiece of a local exhibit titled Whispers of Dawn. Visitors often stood before it for a long time, some moved to tears, others simply quiet, as if it spoke to something wordless in them. The bakery owner came one morning to see it, his flour-dusted hands tucked into his apron pockets. He didn't say anything, just smiled at Lily and nodded. When she left the gallery that day, the air was filled with the scent of spring. She walked to the riverside and sat where she and Thomas used to talk. The water rippled gently beneath the setting sun, and the city stretched out like a living story. She pulled out her notebook, the one she'd filled over the years with thoughts, fragments, and unfinished dreams, and wrote in neat, deliberate script, "The dawn doesn't erase the night. It grows from it. It learns from it. And it shines anyway." She smiled, closed the notebook, and felt a sense of completion wash over her, not the end of something, but the beginning of everything that would follow. That night, as she drifted to sleep, rain began to fall softly against her window. Each drop was a rhythm, a lullaby, a memory echoing her mother's words. Lily listened, truly listened, and the sound was no longer sorrowful. It was peace, pure and absolute. In the quiet glow of the city, the baker's light flickered across the street, steady and unwavering. And somewhere in that same moment, beneath the soft patter of rain, the world whispered its final truth to her, that love, once born, never truly leaves. It only changes form, finding new ways to keep shining through the cracks. Years later, the city had changed. Glass towers reached where old bookshops once stood, and the streets hummed with the quiet persistence of progress. Yet, for Lily, the rhythm of life had slowed to something sacred, an unhurried melody, like the one that used to rise from her mother's favorite record player on Sunday mornings. She lived now in a small studio apartment above a cafe that smelled perpetually of coffee beans and warm pastries. Every morning, she would open her window, let the scent of cinnamon drift in, and listen to the laughter of strangers, to the conversations below, to the sound of her own breath syncing with the pulse of the city. It was peace of a kind she had never known in her youth. The gallery exhibition she had started years ago had grown beyond her imagination. What began as a single painting, Whispers of Dawn, had become a series, each one inspired by fragments of her journey, forgiveness, rediscovery, and the simple beauty of being alive after loss. The final collection was set to debut that autumn, in a larger space downtown, beneath a name that made her smile every time she said it aloud, the bakery that dreams of dawn. The name was an echo of memory. Not of the literal bakery she once passed on her walks to school, but of what it represented, the smell of warmth after a night of cold, the steady light that glowed before sunrise, the feeling that even after grief and darkness, there would always be morning. It symbolized everything her mother had tried to teach her in that letter, everything she had learned through her own long nights of silence and paint. On the evening before the exhibition, she stayed late in the gallery. The paintings lined the walls in quiet harmony, each a fragment of her soul, rendered in gentle pastels and pale blues. There were no harsh edges, no sharp contrasts. Every stroke carried softness, every image whispered the same truth: healing is not sudden. It unfolds slowly, like dawn breaking over the horizon. She sat on the wooden bench in the center of the room, hands folded loosely in her lap. Her favorite piece hung directly across from her, a wide canvas depicting an empty street just before sunrise. The bakery windows were lit from within, golden and hazy as though dreaming. You could almost smell the bread baking, hear the faint clinking of cups and soft laughter. The door stood open, inviting, waiting. It had taken her 3 months to finish that one. There were nights she'd painted until her fingers ached, then erased everything in a rush of frustration, only to start again. But when she finally stepped back that last night and saw it whole, she'd wept. Because it wasn't just a painting of a street or a bakery, it was the embodiment of her healing. The light pouring through those windows was the light she had fought to find in herself. She could almost imagine her mother sitting in that bakery, stirring tea, waiting patiently. The thought made her heart swell with something between sorrow and gratitude. The next day, the gallery filled with people. Strangers, critics, friends, all moving slowly through the space, murmuring softly, their faces touched by the same serenity that filled the air. Lily stood near the back, unnoticed at first, watching them. There was a quiet intimacy in seeing others connect with her work. A woman with graying hair stood before Whispers of Dawn for nearly 10 minutes, tears glinting on her cheeks. A young man took a photo of the bakery window at first light and smiled to himself, as though remembering someone. When a reporter finally approached Lily for a short interview, she spoke not as an artist, but as a human being who had walked through her own storms and found stillness at the end of them. "What inspired this collection?" the reporter asked gently. Lily thought for a moment before answering. "Grief," she said, "and what comes after. I used to think healing meant forgetting, moving on. But now I know it's about carrying the memory gently, like a lantern, not letting it burn you, but letting it light your path." The reporter smiled, visibly moved. "And the name, the bakery that dreams of dawn, what does it mean to you?" Lily's lips curved into a soft smile. "It's a reminder that even the quietest corners of life can hold hope. Every day begins in the dark, the ovens warm before the sun rises, the bread bakes in silence. And then morning comes, and the world smells like something new." That's what I wanted to capture, that quiet faith in the coming light. When the gallery finally emptied, Lily stayed behind once more. The lights dimmed, the echoes faded, and she was alone again with her paintings. She walked slowly past each one, her fingertips grazing the edges of the frames. The air smelled faintly of paint and jasmine, a scent she always used while working. She stopped at the bakery window at first light one last time. Through the painted glow of the imagined bakery, she felt something stir deep within her, a wordless connection to all the mornings she had survived. She closed her eyes, hearing rain begin to patter lightly on the roof of the gallery. It was as though the world had chosen to hum along with her thoughts, with her mother's old words still echoing softly in memory. "The rain has stories, Lily. Listen." She smiled, stepping closer to the painting. "I am, Mom," she whispered. "I always will." That night, back in her apartment, the rain continued to fall, not heavy, but steady, soothing. She left her window open just a little and made herself a cup of tea. The city outside glowed faintly beneath the mist, soft halos of streetlight blurred by raindrops. Somewhere, a bakery light flickered on for the early hours, and the faint scent of bread drifted up from the street below. She sat by the window, watching the first traces of dawn rise above the skyline, pale gold seeping into the indigo night. It was a sight she'd seen countless times before, but this one felt different. It felt complete. She reached for her journal, the same one she had written in years ago, and turned to the final page. Her handwriting was slower now, steadier, filled with quiet acceptance. "The bakery still dreams," she wrote. "The dawn still comes. And so do I." She set the pen down, closed the journal, and leaned her head against the glass. The warmth of morning touched her cheek, and the world outside breathed gently in rhythm with her. Somewhere deep within, she felt the smallest flicker, a light that would never go out. Years passed quietly, as they often do when a soul finally finds peace. The seasons turned with unhurried grace, each one leaving a trace of color, scent, and memory in its wake. Lily grew older, but never lonelier. Her studio above the cafe remained a sanctuary, a place where art and life blended into something simple, steady, and meaningful. She continued to paint, not for fame or galleries, but for the same reason she'd always done it, to listen to the quiet voice of her heart, to give shape to what words could not. The world outside her window changed, but inside, the rhythm remained timeless, the sound of the rain, the hum of early morning ovens downstairs, the laughter of strangers drifting up from the street. Life had become her greatest masterpiece. When Lily passed away one late spring morning, it was gentle, as if she had simply drifted into another kind of dawn. The caretaker of the building found her sitting near the window, a cup of tea cooling beside her, a paintbrush still resting loosely in her fingers. The canvas before her was unfinished, a wash of pale gold and soft blue that looked like morning rising over the sea. In the days that followed, the cafe owner below kept a candle burning in her memory. People from the neighborhood came by, leaving flowers, small notes, and even sketches of their own. The gallery downtown held a tribute exhibition titled "The Bakery That Dreams of Dawn," the art of Lily N. Her work, once born from grief, had become a living testament to resilience and beauty. Visitors came from all over the country to see her paintings, many of them describing the same quiet feeling, as though her art didn't just hang on the walls, but breathed softly in the space around them. Years later, a young artist named Claire wandered into the gallery one rainy afternoon. She had never heard of Lily before. She was simply escaping the weather, looking for somewhere warm. But as she stepped inside and her gaze fell upon the bakery window at first light, she froze. Something about it, the warmth, the tenderness, the open door inviting her in, struck her deeply. It was as if the painting had been waiting for her, whispering something she had needed to hear for a very long time. She spent nearly an hour there, listening to the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass roof, feeling the strange comfort of being seen by a work of art. Before leaving, she bought a small print of the painting and carried it home carefully, as if it were something fragile and sacred. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The image of the glowing bakery window lingered in her mind. She made herself tea and sat by her own window, listening to the rain. And in the stillness, she understood what the painting was saying, that light doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It can be quiet, patient, and kind. It can wait for you. She began painting again the next day, for the first time in months. And somewhere, perhaps beyond time and memory, Lily smiled. The dawn still came. The bakery still dreamed. The rain still whispered its stories. And life, in all its gentle persistence, went on carrying forward the warmth of one woman's heart, from brushstroke to heartbeat, from silence to sunrise.